Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to Double Portion Inheritance Ministries. I'm Maria Merola Wold.
And I'm Gary Wold.
In accordance with 1 Corinthians 9, 7 through 14, after the Sabbath is over, we ask you to prayerfully consider a one-time or recurring donation to www.paypal.com/PayPalMe/DPI Ministries or www.venmo.com@Maria-Merola. You can also use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. Today is July 6th, 2024, and the name of this teaching is called The Two-Horned Serpent from the Tribe of Dan. Now, back in 2022, I believe I recorded this one, and it's up on YouTube. It's called Trump's Merovingian Royal Bloodline. And so that blog is here in Blogger, and I wrote it in 2020, but I published it on April 13th, 2021. It's also on YouTube if you want to go and watch that. Now, since I did this video on Trump's Merovingian Royal Bloodline, I've actually added some more to this blog because as we're on the subject of his royal bloodline, it's important to understand that his mother, Mary MacLeod, is Scottish. She's of course, deceased now, but she was a Scottish Jew. And even Yair Davidiy, who is known for his intense research on where all 12 tribes of Israel were scattered to in the nations, he even gave some insight into this on his website. So here I added an extra piece to this blog, and this extra piece of the blog is subtitled The Two-Horned Serpent from the Tribe of Dan. So if you want to go back and read the blog, you will see that I've added more to the blog since I first wrote it and since I did the recording a couple years ago. But I also turned it into a blog unto itself. The Two-Horned Serpent from the Tribe of Dan. So before we delve into the biblical prophecies concerning the tribe of Dan, I want to share important discoveries made by Yair Davidiy, a Jewish historian who has dedicated his scholarship to finding the lost tribes of Israel in the nations. At his website, he explains that the tribe of Dan are today the people of Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and Northern England. This discovery places Mary MacLeod, the mother of Donald Trump, as belonging to the tribe of Dan. And you can go to his website right here, britam.org/dan.html. So here's an excerpt. And it says, "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days." That's Genesis 49:1. Note carefully that what Jacob was about to speak had little to do with actually blessing his sons, but rather was to be a prophetic utterance regarding each of them with regard to the latter days, and what their father said was hardly smooth and pleasant in their ears. And then there's this other website, Prophecies About the Tribe of Dan. I'm just quoting from the website and giving you some excerpts of the website. The words of Jacob are very telling, even though a number of his sons receive a negative prediction, none quite match the nature of what was spoken concerning the tribe of Dan. Beginning in verse 16, that's in Genesis 49, we read, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. That's Genesis 49, 16 through 17. No other tribe of Israel received a word of prophecy like the one uttered by Jacob to his son Dan. A number of the other children had their weaknesses pointed out or were given predictions regarding dire consequences that would eventually befall them. but only Dan is singled out for his inherent evil. Note carefully that Jacob prophesies Dan is to be a serpent. This can hardly be viewed as inconsequential, particularly in light of the biblical symbolism associated with these and other related reptilian creatures. The serpent is representative of Satan, the great adversary and the personification of wickedness, and is so portrayed throughout the scriptures from his conspicuous appearance in the Garden of Eden in Genesis to the concluding chapter of the book of Revelation. Furthermore, note carefully that this prophecy regarding Dan pertains to his attitude and action toward his own family, his fellow brother tribes. Is Jacob stating or implying here that Dan will be as the adversary in the affairs of Israel in the end of time? Was Dan's father given a revelation of future betrayal within his own clan? If so, this is disturbing news for latter-day Israel and could well provide inquiring minds today with an invaluable key as to what part the tribe of Dan is destined to play in world affairs. Rest assured that we will be seeking specific answers to these very questions throughout the remainder of this discussion. Dan is called a serpent by his father in Genesis 49:17. Jacob, however, is more specific in the next sentence, for he states, Dan shall be an adder in the path. Now, I looked up the word adder in the Strong's Hebrew Concordance, and it's this word shephiphone. That's really how it's pronounced, shephiphone. And it is derived from the root term shuf, which means to gape, to snap at, to overwhelm, and is rendered to break, to bruise, to cover. Thus, it is quite apparent that Jacob's perception of his son in this instance is far from positive. He tells us that Dan the serpent will be in the path of the rider and his horse, and that he will bite at the horse's heels, causing him to fall backward. Thus, Dan is prophesied to be an impediment, an opponent, and a negative force in the latter days. It is well known, of course, that the serpent is representative of evil, of conniving, of worldly wisdom. It is first associated with the great deceiver, Satan the devil, who appeared in the Garden of Eden in the form of a serpent and with subtlety beguiled Eve. Whether this creature was originally the precise description of what we know as a snake today is perhaps debatable, for the derivation of the Hebrew word nakash means to hiss, to whisper, a magic spell, to prognosticate, an enchantment or enchanter, and as such may be subject to more than one interpretation. Now, I didn't write this in the blog, but I'm ad-libbing here. There has been a lot of proof, or evidence, I should say, that I've written in my other blogs that Trump studied Kabbalah magic since the 1980s. Also, the spirit cooking witch that everybody knows about, she, handles a lot of Hollywood celebrities. Her name is Marina Abramovich. She's been recorded as saying that Trump is the magician of the highest order. The highest order. And she even went to the shamans and asked them what they believe about Trump. And what she described was that the shamans go into this meditation where they do what they call collective dreaming. And of course, the shamans are not worshiping the Elohim of the Bible. They're worshiping demons. And so they have said that Trump has been chosen to awaken the world, to bring about what's called a great awakening. And of course, it's not the awakening to the real Messiah. It's an awakening to Lucifer, the fallen angel, who loves to trick people into believing that he's the real Messiah. All right, on to the blog again. So this fact, however, is beside the point with respect to our discussion. The serpent encountered in Genesis 3 was cursed by the Almighty to crawl upon its belly in the dust of the ground, and thus the word nakash became the general term for a snake in the Hebrew language. With respect to the latter days of which Jacob's prophetic words speak, the serpent, of course, plays the signal role, for it is the sign of the adversary, Satan, the devil, and thus the spirit of Antichrist that will arise in the end times. This is so stated in many biblical prophecies, but surely none more emphatically than the book of Revelation, where we read in Revelation 12, 3 through 4, also in Revelation 7 through 9, and 13 and 17, it says, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And the dragon was wroth," or angry, "with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Elohim, and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach." Well, the woman in this prophecy is Jerusalem. We know this from reading Isaiah 66, and also from reading Paul, the Apostle's letter to the Galatians in chapter 4, verse 26. He says, "Jerusalem is the mother of us all." So the woman is Jerusalem. The man-child are those who are born from above, born again through the blood of Messiah Yahushua. I believe they are the same group of people known as the 2 witnesses, the 2 corporate witnesses, those of the 2 houses of Israel who are born again by the blood of the Lamb, and the 2 overcoming assemblies, which are Smyrna and Philadelphia. So this prophecy is talking about the 2 corporate witnesses, those that belong to Messiah in the earth. And the dragon was angry with the woman, which is Jerusalem, because she is the mother of us all, like Paul the Apostle wrote in Galatians chapter 4. He said that Jerusalem is the mother of us all. And so the dragon is Satan. And that old serpent, he is called that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So to those who would argue that the serpent in the Garden of Eden wasn't the devil or wasn't Satan, the book of Revelation proves that is not correct. The devil has many aliases. He is called the great dragon. He is called the serpent. He is called the devil, and he is called Satan. And he is also called Lucifer. We know this because Yahushua said, "And I saw Satan fall out of heaven as lightning." And we also read in Isaiah 14:12 that fallen angel named Lucifer, he said, "How are you fallen from heaven, O Halel?" Halel's the Hebrew name, Halel, Lucifer, which is the Latin translation. "How have you fallen from heaven, O Halel / Lucifer?" Okay, so the only one who's been ever known to fall from heaven is Satan, who is also called Lucifer. Okay, the Greek word for dragon in verse 3 is actually defined as a fabulous kind of serpent, so called because of its keen power of sight, from the root word derke, signifying to see. It is used 13 times in the Apocalypse, or, the book of Revelation, to designate Satan, the devil. Satan, of course, is the real power behind the throne, as it were, of these horrific and end-time events predicted in the book of Revelation. His chief servants, however, are also identified with the image of a serpent Indeed, we read in Revelation 9:15 through 19, that the power of the dreaded latter-day army that devastates 1/3 of the earth's population is likened unto that of a serpent. How interesting, then, that the first human being ever to be scripturally identified with the serpent is none other than the fifth son of Israel and the subject of our discussion, Dan himself. And this serpent connection is to the tribe of Dan, and it cannot be summarily dismissed as a casual use of this symbol. It is the sign of the adversary, Satan, the devil, and its image crops up in prophecy after prophecy in the scriptures. In fact, the snake became the identifying sign of the Danites, both with respect to the figure that appeared on their standard as part of the camp of Israel, as well as to numerous heraldic and other uses throughout the later history of this tribe during its many migrations to key areas of the world. In fact, no other individual human beings are compared to the serpent in all the scriptures save Dan and his descendants. Now, I would like to submit to you that this is quite remarkable and most significant. It also is noteworthy that the biting of the horse's heels is language eerily similar to what we read in the first great messianic prophecy in Genesis 3:15, where Yahuwah says to all the creatures and to the serpent, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed." It, that would be Messiah, the ultimate seed of the woman, should bruise your head, and you, the serpent, shall bruise his heel. In addition to the prophecy of the dying Jacob, Moses also spoke specific words with regard to each of the 12 tribes of Israel just prior to his own death. They are recorded in Deuteronomy 33. Moses' sayings in this chapter are usually regarded as blessings pronounced upon the various clans, and indeed, for the most part, they are. Every single one of these 11 tribes received positive comments and blessings from Yah through his servant Moses, even though most of the people were never really all that faithful. Still, Yahuwah had a special place in his heart for Israel, and he foresaw good things that would eventually befall the people. Of course, the obvious omission at this point is the tribe of Dan. He receives just a single short sentence from the mouth of Moses, and what a contrast it is from the rest of the tribes. In verse 22, we read, "And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan." Not another word is spoken with respect to the Danites. No blessing is given. Nothing positive is stated. Dan is the only tribe in all Israel that failed to be accommodated under the Mosaic blessing. Instead, we are told that Dan is compared to a young lion and that he will leap from Bashan, neither statement of which seems to make all that much sense to most readers of the Bible. There is, however, meaning to the words of Moses that we need to consider in our study. The reference to Dan being a lion's whelp should have a familiar ring to it, for in the previously referenced passage in Genesis 49, Jacob used the identical expression to describe the tribe of Judah, Genesis 49:9. The root for whelp in Hebrew means to turn aside, to gather for hostile purposes. Now, if the promised Messiah was predicted to come through the Lion of Judah, and he is the true lion from Revelation 5:5, then what are we to make of Dan in this regard? You see, Messiah Yahushua, when he comes back, he's coming back with hostile purposes, not for his people, but towards the enemies of Israel. He will come with vengeance, okay? So if the true lion does not descend from Dan, but from Judah, then what lion does? Well, the answer may be found in the simple, well-known passage that reads in 1 Peter 5:8, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour. So you see, the devil is a counterfeiter. He wants to be the lion, but he's not going to be the lion when Messiah returns. He will for 3.5 years, 1,260 days or 42 months, he will present himself as a lion. And we see many places in Scripture where Donald Trump has portrayed himself as a lion. And I'll find those images for you. It's in his, in his cards, in his digital cards that he sells online. There you got, him with a lion, and he's got his paws on the whole world. Okay, what is that trying to tell us? Okay, here's another one. Let the wind begin. Roar 24. Trump. Okay, he's always associating himself with lions. And there's more. I've got way more images, but I'm not going to show them to you right now because I want to stay on track with this teaching. So it appears that the tribe of Dan was particularly despised and highly criticized by the tribe of Judah, and that enmity between these two people began early on in their history. As we have previously noted, Dan came to be considered the lowliest of the clans of Israel, and none thought of the Danites in this light more than those of Judah. Indeed, Moses' words were concerning Dan may contain in them a veiled hint that something dreadful would be associated with this tribe in the future. Could this be the reason why the tribe of Dan is not listed in Revelation, the 7th chapter? All right, now I'm going to go on to another website. Well, it's the same website, but it's another page of the website. It's Dan's affiliation with Mount Hermon and the Golan Heights. In the days of King Jeroboam, the 10 northern tribes rebelled against the house of David and separated themselves from the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The almost immediate result of this division is succinctly recorded for us in 1 Kings chapter 12, where we read, "So Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day, and Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of Yahuwah at Jerusalem," whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt." And he set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made a house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the 8th month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. Okay, so in other words, the feast that is in Judah is Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. And he offered upon the altar. And that's recorded in 1 Kings chapter 12, 19 through 20, also in verses 26 through 32. Now, note carefully the strategic part. The area of Dan plays in this rebellion against Elohim. The golden calf placed in Dan was situated at Mount Hermon, the historic site of pagan Canaanite worship, an even more ancient locale of unspeakably evil pre-flood activity that resulted in the destruction of the human race. Dan, in fact, became the center of Phoenician/Edomite Baal worship among the nations of the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, I strongly suspect that Mount Hermon, given its very early history, whether in the form of legend, myth, or factual reportage, actually forms the basis and is the original model of the fabled mountain of the gods. Virtually all ancient pagan civilizations had a sacred mountain, almost always located in the north, and was deemed to be the home of the gods. By far, the most famous of these is Mount Olympus in Greek, but there are numerous others in different locales and historical eras. Mount Hermon is undoubtedly the oldest of these very hallowed places and perhaps the most significant as well. The concept of the sacred mountain is that it constitutes the center of the world, the gateway to revelation, and the stairway to heaven. Where there was no mountain, the people constructed one. The Babylonian ziggurat, such as the infamous Tower of Babel or the Egyptian pyramids on the Giza Plateau, are prime examples of such human efforts. In fact, the Tower of Babel debacle, the area of Mount Hermon, once again assumed its sacred pre-flood significance. Indeed, the Amorite word for this mountain was Senir. That's in Deuteronomy 3:8-9. This is a variant of the name Shinar. And we read about that in Genesis chapter 10, thus evoking the location of Nimrod and the notorious incident at Babel. Based upon the Paris Zero Meridian, which was universally used prior to the Greenwich International Zero Meridian, established in 1884, Mount Hermon, interestingly enough, is located at precisely 33 degrees latitude and 33rd degrees longitude. It is no accident or coincidence that Scottish Rite Freemasonry has precisely 33 degrees, the 33rd being a conferred status rather than earned. Could some of the original foundational ideas and tenets of Freemasonry actually go back to the pre-flood world associated with Mount Hermon, the initial mountain of the gods at the 33rd parallel? I believe the answer is an unqualified yes, and that is also precisely why Canaan and his descendants were drawn to that area of the world and made it a great post-flood center of the false worship and strong demonic activity. The promised land that Elohim had reserved for his people, Israel, was, of course, the very part of the world chosen by the descendants of the evil Ham through his most perverted son, Canaan. These people were divided up into numerous tribes, and their names fill the pages of the books of Joshua and Judges. Now, just as a side note, I think it's important to explain what happened with Noah and his son, Ham. The scripture tells us that Ham saw his father's nakedness. And when Noah woke up from his drunken stupor, he placed a curse not on Ham, but on his son Canaan, which doesn't seem to make sense at first glance. Why would he curse Ham's son Canaan when it was Ham that committed the sin? Well, it's noted even in the book of Leviticus and in other parts of the Torah that a euphemism for looking upon your father's nakedness is to have sexual intercourse with your father's wife. In other words, Ham had sexual relations with Noah's wife, which was his mother. So in other words, he committed an act of incest. Now, what would, influence him to do such a thing? Well, it's been known in the occult world that to commit an act of incest is supposed to open up a portal to the pineal gland, which they call the third eye. And it is believed in the ancient mystery school religions that if you commit an act of incest, that you will have, your third eye open and you will have occult power. Okay. And so this is the reason why Noah cursed his son Canaan, because Canaan was the offspring of that incestuous relationship between Ham and his own mother. Okay. And so Noah's other two sons, walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Now, some people would say, well, that doesn't make sense. If the nakedness of Noah is a euphemism for, having sexual relations with Noah's wife, then why did Noah's two sons walk backward and cover their naked father? I believe the euphemism continues to explain that what they really covered was Noah's wife. the nakedness of Noah's wife. But like I said, in the book of Leviticus and other parts of the Torah, covering one's nakedness, uncovering one's nakedness is a euphemism of having an incestuous relationship with your father's wife. That's what it means. Okay. So these people were divided up into numerous tribes, and their names fill the pages of the books of Joshua and Judges. How appropriate that the Canaanites established a council of 33 kings who ruled over Palestine. How did they arrive at such a number? It appears to have been the avowed intent of Canaan to reinstitute the pre-flood pagan rituals, religious rites there. Could the number 33 have a connection with the world prior to the Great Deluge? Certainly such a possibility exists, particularly when the fact that the area of Babylon is also situated on the 33rd degree north parallel. If this same general area had pre-flood significance, as it did immediately after the flood with the enterprising efforts of Nimrod, then the pagan significance of the number 33 could have very well ancient origins. Indeed, the most ancient texts, in fact, reveal that the spiritual hierarchy of Satan is comprised of 33 gods or demons and is itself the ultimate basis for the esoteric significance of the specific number. In addition, Masonic lore claims that since Jesus, who was considered as one of the master initiates, apparently died at the age of 33, this exact number represents the highest spiritual level which one can attain. It is likely that Mount Hermon was originally associated with the name of Ham, who was also venerated and worshipped as Tot Hermes. Okay. Now, the fact that our Messiah died at the age of 33 doesn't have any relation to this, but this is what the occult world would have you believe. Okay. In fact, I believe it's also possible that he died at the age of 33 for the express purpose that he was putting to death this esoteric religion, or putting to death all the curses that come along with this ancient religion. The son of Hermes was Pan, and as mentioned earlier, Mount Hermon became the center of Pan worship. Now, this is an image, an artist's depiction of Pan. As you can see, he's having sexual intercourse with a goat. Okay, he's committing bestiality. But Pan was supposed to be part human from the torso up, and then from the legs down, he was a goat. He also had goat horns. This is the same as what we see with Baphomet and Freemasonry. Okay, the tribe of Dan also became devotees of the god Pan, and some of them transferred this cult to Greece, at which point he entered the pantheon of deities where he is best known to readers of Greek mythology. Remember also the name Panias, which is the ancient term for the area around the base of Mount Hermon. You won't see Panias on any modern map. This area has gone through a few name changes over time. Today it is called by the Arab world Banias. In the days of the Messiah, it was known as Caesarea Philippi, and as such is mentioned on several occasions in the New Testament. At that time, it was part of an era called Decapolis. This was not a primary Jewish settlement, and even first century Jews considered it far too pagan to even visit very often. This was then, and had for centuries been, a center for the worship of the god Pan. There was an impressive temple built in his honor at the base of Mount Hermon. Pan was the god of nature, noted for his voracious sexual appetite. He was the lusty god known as Pallas. Now, that's obviously where we get the word phallus, like a phallic symbol. You know, the Washington Monument, the Egyptian obelisk. It is also called the image of jealousy in Ezekiel chapter 8. He was characterized as half goat and thus a satyr. Indeed, the chief satyr, of which there were many in the ancient mythologies. The constellation Capricorn, the goat man, was associated with him, even as it had been long before with Ham, Hermes, and his son Canaan or Pan, and the post-flood progenitors of the pre-flood system of false worship which they successfully reestablished. The unicorn also became connected with Pan and his cult at Mount Hermon. In fact, there is even a brief reference to this fact recorded in the 29th Psalm, which reads, "The voice of Yahuwah is powerful. The voice of Yahuwah breaks the cedars. Yea, Yahuwah breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes them also to skip like a calf. Lebanon and Sirion, like the young unicorn." Psalms 29, 4 through 6. Now, some theologians have said the unicorn is talking about a rhinoceros, which I totally believe that, but there could be more to this than meets the eye. Sirion, we are told in Deuteronomy 3:9, was the Sidonian name for Mount Hermon. With respect to the alternative name Palace, you might be interested to know that the root words comprising the term Palestine are palace and hate. In English it looks like Heth, H-E-T-H, but in Hebrew it's pronounced hate. Palace, we already know, was another name for the god named Pan, whereas hate was the son of Canaan and the father of the Hittites. The original word was Palashet. So Palestine, the name Palestine, comes from this name Palashet. So if you're on the side of the Palestinians, you're not on the side of Yahuwah at all. Okay? According to the Encyclopedia of Religion, the worship of Hermes and his son Pan at Mount Selene in Arcadia was done under the names of Phallus, which is derived from the word phallos, which gives us the term phallus or phallic. The name Hermon itself has a reference to the heap of stones, a landmark, a pyramid. Interestingly, stones were often utilized in the worship of gods. We not only see this throughout the Middle East, but indeed around the world. Stone pyramids were erected anciently in numerous civilizations from Egypt, which is also known for its obelisks as well, to Central and South America and into India. The Babylonians and the Sumerians were famous for their brick and stone towers or ziggurats. Now here's an image of a ziggurat. Now, this is a real image. This isn't like a painting or anything. Okay, this is a real ziggurat that was found in the land of Ur. That's where Abraham was born, Mesopotamia. Okay. Then there are other structures, the mysterious stone circles that we find in various locales from Israel itself to the most well-known of all, those found in England, the most famous of all being Stonehenge. The European stone circles were part of the Druid religion, which sprang from the Danites, who earlier had migrated to Arcadia and other parts of Greece. Many, if not most, of the stone monuments served not only as centers of pagan worship, but were particularly aligned with the stars and planets, allowing the ancients to accurately calculate the movement of the astral bodies, virtually all the major ones of which figured prominently in their religious beliefs and practices. Mount Hermon became popularly known as the Forbidden Place. It marked the northern limit of Israelite conquest in the days of Moses and Joshua. In other words, it was the sign of designating the place where Moses had to stop and go no further. Hermon and beyond were considered outside the influence and protection of the true Elohim. The stone heaps, so often utilized in the worship system of the mystery religions, were actually phallic symbols. In reality, the renaming of the Promised Land by the term Palestine constitutes a brash, outright statement that this was the land of phallic worship, part of the very ancient pre-flood system instigated by the Nephilim and reinstated through the descendants of Ham and Canaan after the flood. You might want to think about these historical facts when you hear this area of the world termed as Palestine. Pan is also closely associated with music and the pipe and flute, most especially, although a rather obscure reference we find in 2 Samuel 24:6, a possible reference to Pan worship being connected to the tribe of Dan. Note the following. Then they came to Gilead and to the land of Tatim Hodshi, And they came to Dan Ja'an and about to Sidon, and come to the stronghold of Tyre. That's in 2 Samuel 24:6-7. Now, of course, there's no letter J in Hebrew, so it would be pronounced as Dan Ya'an. Dan Ya'an. The place named Dan Ya'an, obviously named after Dan, and is clearly shown by the text to be in the extreme northern area of Israel, to which the tribe of Dan migrated. The meaning of this term, however, is intriguing. Most sources render it in one of two ways, either Dan of the woodland or forest, or Dan played a pipe. That comes from Merrill C. Tenney, Zondervan Pictorial Dictionary of the Bible, page 199. Okay? Both of these definitions can be viewed as having a relationship to Pan, since he was the god of nature and thus of the forest and woodlands, and he has always been very closely associated with the musical instrument called a pipe or a flute. In fact, the Pan flute is quite well known. Pan worship was transported from Mount Hermon by a segment of Danites to Arcadia in Greece. Arcadia is a very important area which will form a part of our study later in this series. Although we are getting ahead of our story, suffice it to say that not only was this the region to which the Danite or Edomite sailors eventually migrated, but Arcadia also became the home of the Sicambrian Franks, the ethnic group from which the Merovingians emerged. Okay, so that's really important because in previous videos that I've recorded and blogs that I've written, I explained that President Trump's family descend from the Merovingians. In fact, the likelihood is great that the descendants of Merovi, who became the first kings of the Holy Roman Empire, were granted such title in perpetuity by the papacy, were at least partly of Danite or Edomite extraction. The mythological origin of the Merovingian race is traced back to a water beast known as Quinotar, which took the form of a sea goat. This ancient story is derived from the lore associated with the god Pan, who was in fact a sea goat. The source of this mystical beginning to the Merovingians can be traced directly to the influence of the Danites who took Pan worship to Arcadia and throughout Greece. Capricorn, the astrological sign connected to Pan, eventually became Baphomet and the goat of Mendes, both of which are symbols of Satan, and were worshipped by the Knights Templar, the military wing of the Priory of Sion. Now that term showed up in the movie and the book called The Da Vinci Code, starring Tom Hanks. There was a group of people who call themselves the Priory of Sion, and they pride themselves as being the watchers of the Holy Grail, which they believe is the womb of Mary Magdalene, which is, of course, not supported by scripture whatsoever. It's all based on myth and, Eastern, well, I shouldn't say Eastern, but, it's based on the mystery school religions. Okay, so this Priory of Sion, established at the time of the First Crusade for the express purpose of aiding the reestablishment of the deposed Merovingian line over Europe. With respect to the subject of Freemasonry, the term Sion is strongly associated with the symbolism attached to this ancient evil craft. Note that this word Sion is not Zion with a Z. There is a difference, for in Deuteronomy 4 we read, "And this is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel in the land of Sihon," in other words, one of the giants, king of the Amorites, "who dwelled at Heshbon, and the land of Og," another giant, king of Bashan, from Auror, which is by the banks of the river Arnon, even unto Mount Sion, which is Hermon. Now that's Deuteronomy 4:48 through 44 through 48. Now what's interesting is that the King James Version translates this as Mount Zion, but the scripture in Hebrew renders the name Mount Hermon as Mount Zion, which is what the English translators did. However, if you check it in Hebrew, it reveals this is a mistranslation. Now, here's what I did. I went to the Strong's Concordance, and you can see these are two separate words. Sion with a S is the summit of Mount Hermon, it says. But Sion, which is number 6726, spelled with a Zadeh, okay, it's not spelled with an S, it's Zadeh. It says it's Sion, and it is a permanent capital, a mountain of Jerusalem. They're not the same, okay? So Zion in Hebrew is Sion, and it is the name of the famous mountain of Jerusalem. It is used often throughout the Old Testament, both in a heavenly as well as an earthly sense. The key word in Deuteronomy 4:48, however, is not Zion at all, but an entirely different term, Sion with an S, and indeed is the correct alternate name of Mount Hermon. The term Sion with an S is connected directly to the pagan idolatry centered around Mount Hermon. The term Sion is connected directly to the pagan idolatry centered around Mount Hermon, and its inclusion in Freemasonry is not coincidental, since this assumed fraternal organization has been for centuries the promulgator of the ancient mystery religion, and at its upper echelons is integrally involved in the age-old ongoing attempt to control the world. In this regard, Mount Hermon, Sion, Esau, Dan, Baal, Freemasonry, etc., in the north stands in total opposition to Jerusalem, Zion, Judah, Yahuwah, Messiah, and the Torah in the south. See, this is why the nations of the world are going to come against Jerusalem. Okay? And as an aside to this aspect of our study, it is instructive to know that in Celtic, the word Sion means mountain of stones or a fortress. Now, this makes sense in light of Daniel chapter 11, which I'll go there right now. In Daniel chapter 11, we see a prophecy about the little horn who honors the God of fortresses, okay? And I will add that to the blog later because it just came to me just now as I was, reading it. Let's go to the book of Daniel. Let's see, Daniel, there we go, 11. Okay, and in verse 38, it says, this is talking about the man of sin, the son of perdition. It says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. That's talking about Yahuwah, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. And then in verse 37, it says, neither shall he regard the Elohim of his fathers, nor the desire of women. Now, this is not talking about homosexuality. This phrase in Hebrew, the desire of women, just for you guys to understand, it's kimda. And it's talking about a deity who is desired by women. And that deity who was desired by women is an ancient cult of Tammuz. So in other words, what this is talking about is that the false Messiah, the man of sin, the little horn, shall not regard the God who is called Tammuz, who was known to be the desire of women. Okay. In Greek, he was called Adonis. Okay. So in other words, he's not going to honor Tammuz, nor shall he regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. This is not talking about homosexuality, okay? In verse 38, it says, but in his estate shall he honor the Elohim of forces. Now, some versions of the Bible uses the word fortresses, okay? That word here is ma'oz in Hebrew, a fortified place, a place of defense, a fort, okay? A fort or a fortress. So he shall honor the God of fortresses. Okay, and who exactly is the God of fortresses? Well, as I'm looking at this, it's saying that the Celtic word for Sion, which is Mount Hermon, means mountain of stones or a fortress. Okay, the Druids would build huge fires in the midst of their great stone circles or scions, and the high priest would conduct worship services standing in the midst of the fiery stones. That kind of reminds me of Ezekiel 28, where, the king of Tyre, the prince of Tyre, which we know is Lucifer, that he's walking in the midst of the fiery stones. The central stone was called the Stone of the Covenant, and in Ireland, where there was much Danite migration and influence, it was known as Bethel, the house of Elohim. Just as an interjection, the Priory of Sion, a highly secret society connected with the Knights Templar, which we will discuss in another installment of this study, has been, since at least the time of the First Crusade, which is 1099 AD, totally dedicated to the restoration of a particular royal house called the Merovingians, installing on the throne of a united Europe the very man who may well be revealed as the end-time biblical Antichrist. How interesting is it that the Old Testament contains precisely 33 separate terms denoting the latter-day Antichrist, and it is by no means a mere coincidence that in the Hindu sacred book, the Vishnu Purana, we read these 33 divinities exist age after age, and their appearance and disappearance is in the same number as the sun sets and rises again. That's on page 166. Or that the Buddhist Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks of 33 heavens ruled over by Indra and the 33 ruled over Mara. The obvious answer to these questions is hardly. Even in our own day, the current European Council of Princes, ostensibly the advisory body to the European Union, consists of exactly 33 participating members, divided into the Council of 9 and the Council of 24. Every distinguished member of this assembly is of Merovingian lineage. The Merovingian dynasty is the royal bloodline that preceded King Charlemagne and the Carolingian usurpers of the throne of the Holy Roman Empire, a bloodline that claims divine descent, but as we shall soon come to see, derives instead from the apostate Israelite tribe of Dan. This conclave is destined to become the occult hierarchy of Europe. The present head of the European Council of Princes is HRM Prince Michael James Alexander Stuart, 7th Count of Albany, Scotland, succeeding the Habsburgs of Austria, who had held the seat since 1946. That's the year that President Trump was born, 1946. Rest assured, therefore, that this organization, the Priory of Sion, and the evil ruler to come all have or will have direct ties to Freemasonry, the 33rd parallel, Mount Hermon, Esau, Dan, and Baal worship. It should also be of interest that the headwaters of the Jordan River emanate from Mount Hermon. The name Jordan, as you can easily see, contains the word Dan. It is derived from the Hebrew word meaning to descend and can be defined as the descent or the going down of Dan, and has always been associated with death. The Jordan River marks the eastern boundary of Israel and winds its way like a serpent of Dan down from the cave of Pan on Mount Hermon. As it moves along, silt and debris, the earthly wastes are picked up by the flowing waters. Down, 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 the river of Dan descends until it reaches the lowest land region of the face of the earth, the appropriately named Dead Sea, where forward motion finally ceases as it spills its filthy contents into that lifeless body of water. Remember that Naaman the Syrian at first refused to bathe 7 times in the Jordan exclaiming that there were far better rivers in his own land. Perhaps this is why the Messiah agreed for John to baptize him in the Jordan River, since it has such a connotation as the place of death. And of course, our Messiah came to die for the sins of the world. Of course, we could not leave off a discussion of this particular area of the world without mentioning the fact that this region today is known as the Golan Heights, over which so much controversy and bloodshed has arisen in the land of Israel. One of the chief purposes of the Six-Day War in 1967 was to gain control of the Golan from Syria. It has remained ever since perhaps the most hotly disputed territory on earth, and will almost certainly figure prominently in the end-time prophetic scenario that will unfold. So when you hear news about the Golan Heights in Israel, think about Dan and Mount Hermon and remember the prophecy that we read earlier in Jeremiah 8:15 through 17. We looked for peace, but no good came, and for a time of health, but behold trouble. The snorting of his horses was heard from Dan. The whole land trembles at the sound of the neighing of his strong ones, for they are come and have devoured the land. For behold, I will send serpents among you, and they shall surely bite you. Now, can the tribe of Dan be redeemed? Now, this is my comment. Okay, what I was reading up until now was from that website. So this is my response. I submit to you that those descended from the tribe of Dan may still be redeemed, but they will have to repent and be grafted into the tribe of Judah, Yehudah, the tribe into which our Messiah was born. You see, according to Ezekiel 47:22 through 23, any stranger may be grafted back into the house of Israel simply by sojourning or walking with one of the tribes of Israel. In the case of the Danites, who were disinherited for their idolatry, that's in Hosea 1:9, the only way back into the covenant is through the line of the tribe of Yehudah, Judah. Now, I've got some links here for you. The Donald, the serpent seed from the royal bloodline of the tribe of Dan. Now, when some people use this phrase, the serpent seed, to imply that Eve had sexual relations with the serpent. I do not believe that. I do not adhere to that. But there definitely is a serpent seed. The serpent seed does not appear until Genesis chapter 6, which I will go over very briefly with you just so you understand. Right here in Genesis chapter 6, it says, "And Yahuwah said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his day shall be 120 years. Now, I used to believe that this verse was saying that no human being will live longer than 120 years following the flood. Now, I agree that that's part of it, okay, but it goes even deeper than that, okay? It says in the previous verse, the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of Adam. The word men here in Hebrew is Adam. Now, it's making a distinction between the sons of Elohim and the daughters of men. So that's very peculiar because the daughters of Adam are a different group than the sons of Elohim. Now, in the New Testament, we see many times where it talks about the sons of Elohim, that he has made us to be sons of Elohim. But in this context, it's talking about fallen angels, okay? And I'll show that to you. And it says that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, or Adam, that they were fair. That word fair means beautiful in Hebrew. And they took them wives of all which they chose. Okay, and this is why Yahuwah said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. Because he's grieved over the fact that humans are allowing themselves to be overtaken by demonic possession. And now, no demon can possess us if we belong to Yahuwah. Okay? For that he also is flesh, and yet his days shall be 120 years. And then it goes on and says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim, that's Benaiah Elohim, came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Now, when you break this down in Hebrew, and I'll show it to you, giant is nephil, which is the singular word for Nephilim. It means a feller, that is a bully or a tyrant or a giant. The word nephil actually means fallen one. If you look up the root word 5307, Nafal. It means to fall in a great variety of applications. Okay, so nephil is a root word that comes from to fall. So these are fallen ones, fallen angels. And it says, and after that, when the sons of Elohim came in under the daughters of Adam, there it is, men is the word Adam, which means human being. Okay. It's not just talking about the daughters of Adam and Eve. It's talking about the daughters of human beings. Okay. So the sons of Elohim are obviously not human. Okay. And they bear children to them. The same became mighty men. Well, that word mighty men, Gibor, means a warrior, a tyrant, a giant. Okay. Now humans aren't giants. I mean, Goliath was a giant. He was not entirely human. He was obviously a Nephilim. Okay. And then it says that they were of old. But when you look up this word old, it's olam. Olam is properly concealed. That is the vanishing point. Generally, time out of mind, past or future. That is eternity. In other words, these creatures are not human. They come from old. They come from olam, eternity. Men of renown. That word renown is Shem. It means a position, an appellation, a marker, memorial of individuality, honor, authority, fame. So men of renown has to do with Greek mythology. It has to do with these famous stories that were told in those days, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, okay? Hercules. That's what it's referring to. These are not human beings. Now, the people who don't adhere to this idea of Nephilim, they claim that these giants were the descendants of Noah's son Shem. But that makes no sense because Shem was a righteous line of people. They wouldn't be giants. That's just silly to believe that, you know. But that's all. I'm not going to expound too much on that right now because I want to get back to this. Okay. So where was I at? Yeah, I was right here. Okay. So what's interesting is that when you look at the Illuminati bloodlines that control the world, okay, here they are. There's 13 families, the Astor bloodline, the Bundy bloodline, the Collins bloodline, the DuPont bloodline, the Freeman bloodline. We got that actor Morgan Freeman. I wonder if he's from that bloodline. The Kennedy bloodline. Ted Bundy, who was a serial killer. I wonder if he comes from that bloodline. You have to wonder. The Lee bloodline, I guess that's a Oriental, right? The Onassis bloodline. Jackie Onassis was married to Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. The Rockefeller bloodline, the Rothschild bloodline, the Russell bloodline, the Van Dyne bloodline, and number 13, you have Merovingian. So the plan is for the Illuminati is that the 13th tribe or the 13th Illuminati family are the ones they want to rule the world in the end of days because the Merovingians supposedly have the most royal blood. Okay. And if you go to my, I'll include this in this link, below the video, but you'll be able to read all these links I have revealing Trump's Illuminati bloodline, Donald Trump's New World Order connections revealed, revealing Trump's Illuminati bloodline, Trump the Merovingian, the bloodlines of the U.S. presidents, the New World Order connection, Donald Trump's reawakened gaslighting tour, the Serpent seed from the royal bloodline, tribe of Dan, on and on. There's a lot of websites here you can go to and see what I'm talking about. Now, there's a place in Israel that has been dedicated to President Trump. Back in 2020, a friend of mine who currently lives in Israel pointed this place out to me. She sent me a photo of this place called Trump Heights, 24/7 House of Prayer. Now, according to Wikipedia, this is an Israeli-occupied settlement in the Golan Heights. Now, we've been talking about the Golan Heights. Trump Heights is a planned Israeli settlement in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights named after and in honor of Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Israeli settlements in the Golan Heights are widely regarded as illegal under international law. However, the Israeli government disputes this. It will be under the jurisdiction of the Golan Regional Council. You can look that up here at this website, this other one, Jewish Virtual Library, the Golan Heights. So the Golan Heights rise from 400 to 1,700 feet in the northeastern section of the country. Israel's highest mountain, Mount Hermon, is located here. Mount Hermon's highest peak is more than 9,000 feet high. The top elevation under Israeli control is Mizpah Shalagim, the snow observatory, at about 7,300 feet. Okay? There are a few interesting things about this place that are very telling. The first thing that comes to mind when I see this photo of Trump Heights, okay, and you can see the 7-branch menorah, but what's sitting there is the eagle, okay? And it says here from Isaiah 14:12, how are you fallen from heaven, O Halel, Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? Verse 13 says, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Elohim. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. In verse 14, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. In verse 15, yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, hell, that is, to the sides of the pit. Now, the Hebrew word for height in Isaiah 14:14 is as follows. It's Bama. Now, some people have postulated that that's why they think that Barack Obama is the one who falls from heaven. But see, no, because the way Barack Obama spells his name, Barack is spelled with the Hebrew letter kuf, or kaf, I should say, which is a K in English. But the word for lightning is the Hebrew letter kuf, which is a Q in English. Now, if Barack Obama spelled his name with a Q, then we could accurately say that our Messiah said, I saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. But that word for lightning, it ends with a Q or a Hebrew letter kuf. It doesn't end with a kaf, okay? Satan fall lightning. Okay, so we're going to see that scripture right there. Our Messiah said, I saw Satan fall as lightning. Luke 10:18. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. The Hebrew word for lightning is Barak, spelled with a Q, not a K. Okay, because Barak spelled with a K means to bless Elohim. It means to bless Elohim. Now, of course, I don't believe Barack Obama is blessed, but that's just the name he chose for himself, okay? So people try to make this prophecy fit Obama because of the word Bama, okay? But what's interesting is that the meaning of this word Hermon, as in Mount Hermon in Hebrew, here's what it says. It's number 2763, haram. It's a primitive root, means to seclude, specifically by a ban, to devote to religious uses, especially destruction, physical and reflexive, to be blunt as to the nose, to make accursed, to consecrate, to utterly destroy, devote, forfeit, have a flat nose, utterly slay, make away. The root word is as follows, kerem. It comes from this root word, 2764, which means shutting in, as in shutting in, a doomed object, extermination, a cursed thing, dedicated thing, things which should have been utterly destroyed, utter destruction, devoted thing. So in other words, Mount Hermon is the place where Joshua, the son of Nun, conquered and defeated the giants, the Nephilim. See the book of Joshua, chapter 12, 1 through 5. Now, President Donald Trump worships Apollo, okay? He worships himself as Apollo. The real reason why the global elite bankers chose 9/11 to take down the Twin Towers is because of what it says in Revelation 9/11. And it says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. Abaddon. Okay, but in the Greek tongue has his name Apollyon. Now, these are some questions that people ask Yardavidi concerning Trump's mother, Mary McLeod. You can go to that website and read about what they asked him and what he said. I'll give you the short version. Donald Trump's mother, Mary McLeod, was a Scottish Jew from the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan has been prophesied as the two-horned serpent that bites and deceives and kills his victims. Now, I made this graphic here, and as you can see, this is Nikolai Carpathia from the Left Behind series. He's holding a vial of this green serum. And look at how eerily similar a young Donald Trump looked to Nikolai Carpathia. Okay, and I wrote here on the graphic, Antichrist leader Nikolai Carpathia from Left Behind, World at War, and we can see that the world is about to go into World War III. And he, in the movie, is showing off the deadly green poison that will kill billions of souls on Earth. That's the narrative that they were presenting in the movie, that this green serum was supposed to kill a lot of people. And so look at this prophecy again, Genesis 49:17. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder. Now, I looked up this word adder. It's this Hebrew word shephiphone, and there really is a creature that is called an adder. It's a two-horned serpent. We'll discuss this a little bit more, so stay with me. So he shall be an adder, a two-horned serpent in the path. This word path is direct. It means the way. Okay, in other words, the place, the way has to do with the way that we express our faith, the way, okay, the way. So he is going to disrupt the path of righteousness that bites the horse heels so that his rider shall fall backward. Okay, so reminds me of the white horse in Revelation 6:2. Okay, that I was told on March 21st, 2020, that the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, spoke to me very clearly that morning and said, Donald Trump is the rider on the white horse, to which I was stunned and did not expect that at all. But now I see clearly why the Father was showing this to me. Now, this is a new study published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation, which has identified a snake venom-related enzyme that may be the key cause of related mortality. And of course, we know what that's talking about. You can see a little caricature of the, syringe, and there's a little serpent coming out of it. Now, many times, not just once, but over and over again, Trump repeatedly recites the poem about the snake that gave a woman a deadly bite. And there's a point in the poem where he says, "Oh, shut up, silly woman. You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in." And so, it's a cryptic thing that he reads, and most people won't pick up on it. But in the year of the scamdemic, I said, now I know what he was talking about. Okay. And like I already said, on March 21st, 2020, Yahuwah showed me that President Trump is the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6:2. I went and looked up the meaning of the words as he instructed me to do. And I saw and behold a white horse. That word white is leukos. And it means light. But see, Trump is portraying the role of the false light. Okay. In Isaiah 14:12, the fallen angel Halel is translated as Lucifer in Latin, and it means light bringer. So in other words, what he brings is not the true light, Okay, it's a false light. Okay, and I saw and behold a white, that's Lukos, and he that sat on him had a bow. That word bow is toxon, and a crown. In Greek, it's Stephanos, but in Latin, it's corona. Okay, he was given a crown, and he went forth conquering. That word means to subdue. It's Nikeo. In Greek, it means to subdue, to conquer. Okay, this shows us that Trump is portraying the bringer of a false light, just like Satan or Lucifer, for who transforms himself as an angel of light. And we're told that in 1 Corinthians that Satan can transform himself as an angel of light. The word bow is toxon, which literally means poisonous bow and arrows. Okay, now Trump's Operation Warp Speed was the first seal, the rider on the white horse, going forth conquering, subduing, and enslaving. Genesis 49:16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And then in verse 17, it says, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder. And that word adder, I looked it up in Hebrew, two-horned serpent in the path that bites the horse heels so that the rider shall fall backward. Now, Trump already admitted that he's the snake. And of course, he's telling this poem, and he expects everybody to not see it, but we see what it's telling us. Okay, he's speaking cryptically for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. He's admitting he's the rider on the white horse, but he's also the serpent that bites the woman with a deadly bite. The name Dan means judge. Yahuwah is going to use Donald Trump to judge the world of idolatry because many people are worshiping him as the Savior instead of looking for the real Messiah to return from heaven. This prophecy tells us that Dan shall be a serpent by the way. The word way in Hebrew, derek, means a course of life, a mode of action. This means that Donald Trump's character is that of a serpent in the way. It's the way that he lives. The Hebrew word adder, shephithon, which means a cerastes, a two-horned serpent. And I decided to look it up. And I'll show you that there really is a creature called a cerastes. It is also referred to as a devil-horned snake. The cerastes can either have two large ram-like horns or two pair of smaller horns. The cerastes hides its head in the sand with only two horns protruding out of the surface. This is meant to deceive other animals into thinking it is food. The cerastes also uses its horns to strike and to gore people or animals to death. And now here's a website that I looked it up. Cerastes horned viper. Okay, and it goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to read it now, but it says the venom, according to a report published in the Oxford Journal of Medicine, has more than 13 different toxins. Isn't that interesting? 13, right? 13 for the 13 Illuminati families. It's a witch's brew of poisons that may vary and mix by geographical location within the reptile's range. This is a real photo of a cerastes. Isn't that creepy looking, that thing? Very creepy. Okay? It has two horns, and it's covered with scales, as you can see. Okay? It causes conditions such as massive local swelling, acute pain, excessive bleeding or clotting, depending on the blend of toxins, nausea, abdominal pain, sweating, exhaustion, kidney failure, and heart irregularities. The toxins could also inflict mental disorders, severe headaches, paralyzed facial muscles, and other peculiar sensations. Here's a couple links you can go to read more about what this creature can do. Now, continuing to decipher Genesis 49:17, we learn that the Hebrew words in the path, or orak, which means a road well traveled, a caravan, an army, or a troop, or a race. This word speaks to the fact that Trump has a warlike demeanor, and he means to harm anyone who stands in his way. The word bites in Hebrew is nashak, and it means to strike, to sting, to oppress. The word heels in this prophecy means to lie in wait at the rear of an army. The Hebrew word backward is akor, and it means to turn one's back toward the east, which is Jerusalem, okay? And to turn toward the northwest. Because we are told in Ezekiel chapter 8 that the ancients were turning their backs on Jerusalem, right? And they were turning towards the sun. They were worshiping the sun. Okay, let's look at that real quick. It says, he says, then he said unto me, have you seen this, O son of man? Turn you yet again, and you shall see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of Yahuwah's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of Yahuwah, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, and their backs toward the temple of Yahuwah, and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. Okay, but of course, this is talking about them turning their backs. Okay, they turn their faces toward the east. Okay. With their backs toward the temple and their faces toward the east. Okay. This tells us that Trump will turn his back on Israel and he will send troops to attack her from the northwest. Of course, that's going to be America and her 10-nation confederacy. This is shown to us in the prophecies concerning the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation 16:16. In the film Left Behind, The World at War, we can see the Antichrist leader named Nikolai Carpathia in his high-rise building. And where's it located? It's in Manhattan, New York. It's like they're telling us, even though there's a lot of things in that movie that, of course, they're teaching the pre-tribulation rapture, which is not biblical. We don't agree with a pre-tribulation rapture. But they're giving us other predictive programming. And I find it odd that the previous president is a black guy like Obama, right? And he's being portrayed as a good guy. But the guy that comes after him is a white guy that looks eerily similar to Donald Trump. And he's holding a green serum in his hand. And Trump is known to call himself the father of the V. Of course, you know, the snake bite. So, in the movie, there's a scene where Nikolai Carpathia is standing in his high-rise building in Manhattan, New York. They show the building from the outside, and it's obvious they're trying to show us the One World Trade Center. As Nikolai stands in front of the Manhattan skyline in his office, he shows President Fitzhugh, Gerald Fitzhugh, a vial of his new green serum that will be used to kill millions of people, if not billions. President Fitzhugh is played by Louis Gossett Jr. He's a black man. At the beginning of the film, President Fitzhugh, speaking into a tape recorder, tells us that he is the one who helped propel Nikolai Carpathia to power. That's exactly what happened. Whether we realize it or not, 8 years of a President Obama, presidency caused people to get so disgusted that they were ready to vote for Trump. So Obama did help propel Trump to power. I believe they were showing us that in this movie, okay, that President Fitzhugh, who is supposed to represent Obama, it was 8 years of an Obama presidency that made Americans disgusted enough to want to vote for Trump. They're telling us that this final Antichrist leader is a man who is from Manhattan, New York. We know that is Trump. Nikolai Carpathia even looks very similar to a young Donald Trump. It reminds me of Donald Trump's snake poem, which he read out loud, and he continues to do so at all of his rallies, pretending that it was about illegal immigration. It wasn't until March of 2020 that I woke up and realized that Trump's snakebite poem was a cryptic message he was sending out to the elites. He was telling us that he's the snake who bit the woman, that's humanity, with a deadly bite. And, I've got another blog and a video on YouTube, about this. And President Trump poem about the snake and the woman. And so you can go there and read that, and you'll get more insight about what that poem is all about. But here we have this prophecy out of the book of Dan this prophecy that was told by Jacob about his own son, Dan, and that Dan would be a two-horned serpent. And how do we know that President Trump is from the tribe of Dan? Well, as I've already said, Yair Davidi, who is a Jewish historian who's been studying for years where the tribes of Israel migrated to, he wrote on his website that Trump's mother, Mary McLeod, is of Scottish descent and that the Scots are where the tribe of Dan migrated to. So the tribe of Dan are the Scottish people, Wales, Ireland, and Northern England. So you will find a lot of prophecy verifying who Donald Trump really is. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Shalom.
Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. We hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast and that you are encouraged in your walk with Messiah. For more teachings, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of our latest content. Visit Maria's many blogs at doubleportioninheritance.com. That's doubleportioninheritance.com. This ministry is made possible by the prayers and support of listeners like you. To make a donation by PayPal or Venmo.com, use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. That's doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. On behalf of Maria and Gary at Double Portion Inheritance Ministries, may Yahuwah bless you.